Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. We continue talking about this meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, but today from a different angle. We've been talking about its implications for Iran, for the proxy terror groups that are still targeting Israel. But now we want to look at a very different issue, which is the normalization process for Israel, the Middle East, and beyond. And joining me to discuss this is Dr. Daniela Giulia Traub, who is a geopolitical expert. Daniela, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's dig in if we can. The president, the prime minister, they meet, and in your view, a great implication of that meeting is what it could do for regional peace. What can you share with us on that?
So a lot of the focus is on the deal in Gaza and when the war there is going to end or not, and if the hostages are going to come home or not. But I want to focus on the Syrian normalization that has been whispered around. So, if there will be such a normalization, we have to understand that it is going to be different than the Abraham Accord normalization, where we actually have warm peace with the UAE, Morocco, and other countries, Bahrain. But this probably won't be the case with Syria. The reason for that is also because, let's say, the UAE went through a process with inside itself for many years in order to bring the country into prosperity. And that is one of the reasons for it to come closer to Israel. Now, also, we have leaders in the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco that understand they were educated in Europe and they wanted to bring that prosperity back to their people and back to their country. So, this is a process that they actually went through. Yes, we also have Iran, and that is a common enemy to Israel and those states. Yet, it's not the only reason for the normalization, and it's more about what those states went through to get to the point where they actually recognize Israel and agree to become partners. Now, that's not the case with Syria. With Syria, we have El Julani, who has links to ISIS and to Al Qaeda. We don't know his real intentions. Now he's trying to build a state that's not stable, and we don't know how long he's actually going to stay in power. So we have to be very careful with this normalization. So basically, and probably the normalization with Syria will look more like the cold peace with Egypt, or maybe just a security pact with Syria in order for them not to attack Israel and to push them as further away from the fence and from our citizens and people that are sitting next to the border there. So that's the first thing that we should know, that the normalization, if it will occur, will be limited, and it will probably be government to government, not people to people like the other accords. And it will mainly be based on security purposes and not more than that.
So let me ask you, do you think Israel will need to cede territory that was gained in this war in order to strike a deal with Syria? And if so, that seems troubling because it's a very unstable government and there's so many unknowns. Israel gives up land, and then the next thing you know, a deal falls apart. It's hard to get that land back.
Absolutely. And Sadat said about Menachem Begin, poor Mr. Begin, I got land and he got a piece of paper. Yet the deal with the peace, well, cold peace with Egypt did continue. But what can we see in the last few years? The last few years, Egypt was allowed to go into the demilitarized areas next to Israel in order to fight ISIS, but they haven't left. And their army is growing bigger and bigger by the day. So there is a question mark about how much this peace is actually stable in the years to come. And the same question would be forwarded to Syria. Can we actually trust Al Julani? And my instinct, I don't really have knowledge about the future, but my instinct is that somebody that was within ISIS and Al Qaeda is somebody you can't really trust. I don't think, and also we can see that from the Arab media, that we will have to retreat from the Golan Heights, but we may have to retreat from the territory Israel has occupied in the last year. I don't know if that's a good idea because what we saw on the 7th of October is that the citizens became the first line. They were too close to the border. Now, the purpose of the army is to defend its people, and they have to be in the first line. Even if they fall, even if our young soldiers fall, they should be always before the civilians. And if we retreat from the territory we occupied, I don't know if that will be feasible, but we never know. So I don't know the answer if that will actually happen, but from what we're seeing in the Arab media, that is the direction.
And you said something very interesting in terms of framing what a deal, what a peace agreement with Syria would look like, government to government as opposed to people. So, when we look at the peace agreement with the UAE, Israelis travel freely to the UAE. And even when you look at Jordan and Egypt, Israelis go to Petra, they go in Egypt. What would an agreement look like with Syria if it's really just on that government level and there isn't this kind of bilateral relationship between the people themselves? Is that a valuable agreement?
For the upcoming years, maybe, but it really depends where El Julani will take his people. If he'll manage to even build a state, building a state is an art, and not many succeed. You can see the great example of the UAE from the 70s. They started building their state, and look where it is today. It looks like Singapore of the Middle East. But I'm not sure Syria will manage to do so. The UAE permanent citizens, they have about a million and a half, 2 million, and they quite the same from the same tribes. In Syria, we have a much more divided country, different kinds of people that are in war with each other, different kinds of tribes, and it will be so much more challenging for El Julani to actually build this stable state. So we're only at the beginning. We don't know how it's going to look. But meanwhile, it's a bit problematic to build on this peace for long term. Israel still needs to be alert to Syria, still needs to gather intelligence in Syria, and has to be prepared to attack places where, if we see a threat occurring, or Iran, as it was in the last few years, taking possession inside of Syria. So we have to be very alert. We also have to see that Turkey is very involved in the new regime, is backing up the new regime, and Turkey has issued some problematic statements towards Israel, and people are guessing that after Iran, that will be our next real enemy. I don't know if that's the case, but we can see that it's not going in a good direction.
Okay, so normalization with Syria has implications potentially for our relationship or lack thereof with Turkey. What about in the broader region? Does it do anything for building an accord with Saudi Arabia or any other countries?
You're accurate. That is exactly the direction, and I think that that is what President Trump is aiming for. I think that Syria is just a point to reach Saudi Arabia in order to convince it to join into the Abraham Accords, which was already spoken about before. And some people say that the 7th of October actually occurred in order to prevent Saudi Arabia from joining this initiative. And why is this so crucial and critical for President Trump? The answer is China. What President Trump, together with the countries here in the region, the Gulf countries and Israel, are trying to build is a railroad and a pipeline that goes from India through the Gulf to Israel and up to Europe. It bypasses Turkey, it bypasses Iran, and mostly, and the main thing that is the goal, it bypasses Russia and China, and it weakens them. If you see the entire map of the world, you see the Ukraine and Russian war, and you see the African wars, you see the Israeli-Iran war. And just a year ago, there was a caricature of Uncle Sam being pulled between Israel and Iran and Russia and Ukraine, and his eyes weren't on the ball. The ball was China. So I believe that Trump saw this dynamic and decided to focus each time on a different zone. Iran and Israel for the US is a zone. So he had to win this battle, but not only win it, he had to send a signal to China. I back up my allies. Think what China sees and interprets when it knows that the US attacked Iran. It goes back to Taiwan. It goes back there and says, okay, maybe it won't be clever now while Trump is president to attack militarily attack Taiwan. So that's a very, very strong message that was sent to China when he decided to attack. So he's trying, in my eyes and my view, he's trying to isolate the problems, solve them, bypass China, and weaken it economically in order to, in the end, defeat it. Um, I hope that will work, but you need Syria for that, and you need Saudi Arabia for that. And that is the aim goal of Trump and also of Netanyahu. If you read Netanyahu's book from the 90s and things he wrote about two main issues that up until today are the most crucial for him. The first one, Iran. The second one, economic ties and cooperation with the Gulf states. Till today, those are his most crucial points, and that's what he is trying to achieve.
Okay, so if we can just double down on this point for a second. If Israelis or US diplomats are sitting down with the Saudis, what does a peace deal with Syria, how does that incentivize the Saudis? Meaning, if this is all about economics, aren't they just crunching numbers and trying to figure out how everyone can make more money? Why is it relevant for the Saudis or for the US if there's an additional few countries, smaller countries, who wish to join the accords?
First of all, because it's the Sunni pack. Syria is Sunni, Morocco is Sunni, Saudi Arabia is Sunni, UAE is Sunni. It goes together. It's an ally. It's an ancient ally in which you want to be part of. Second of all, economic incentives. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, they used to just send money, let's say to Jordan and Egypt, more like grants or financial aid. And they understood lately that that just isn't working. So what are they trying to do now? They're trying to take control economically. It's not exactly what Iran did, where they were trying also religiously to take over and they built a lot of mosque and educational institutions. Here they're actually investing money, buying state-owned properties like harbors and factories, and they turn it into private equity and trying to actually donate, contribute would be the word, to the economy of Syria, Egypt, and Jordan, because they had enough of these failing states and they want to help grow the Arab economy. They also know that oil is not the solution because it's running out. So also internally for years now, they have been investing in their population in order to bring the population towards a knowledge-based economy. A knowledge-based economy is what Israel is, a high-tech zone, because they know that there is the money in the future. If they invest in those countries, they bring up together with them the other Arab states. Also, the initiative that Trump is trying to do from Asia into Europe includes going through Syria, and it makes it easier if that country won't put threat on the initiative of this road, on this railway into Europe. Now, if you have a terrorist state in the middle of this initiative, it threatens the internal stability of states like the UAE and Saudi Arabia. But if it is a state that's with you, it makes it much more stable economically for the long run.
Danielle, I really appreciate this analysis. I want to ask you a tough question if I can. It seems like a lot of the language of the Middle East is religion, is ideology, is territorial gains, and you're talking about economics. And Westerners, may think in the term of economics, but in the Middle East, very often it's not about economics, it's about power. Meaning, look at Iran, for example. The entire methodology of Iran to seek nuclear armaments and to seek proxy warfare, if they took all of that investment and put it into economics, it would look very different. So, do you think economic gain is a strong enough language and incentive in the Middle East to overpower the terror?
Not in all countries. But I am positive. My PhD actually deals exactly with that in the UAE, Morocco, and Azerbaijan. How those countries put aside, not exactly put aside, but alongside with the power games, they also turned it into an economical game. Now, as I said before, in order to get to a knowledge-based economy, and that's where the world is going to, you have to change within because it's all about education. And you can't get to a knowledge-based economy without your people, without infrastructure, without government introducing science and technology, or investing it, or at least not disturbing. So there's a huge process going on within those countries in order to get to their goal, and they actually are moving up in the rank of knowledge-based economy countries. They aren't at the Israeli level, US level. They're not there yet, but they're on their way. There are countries on the other side, like Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, who did not reach that, who their leaders still don't see it in that light. So I believe that the UAE and Saudi Arabia are trying to push them to that direction, but I think that it's something internal. If those states don't go through the process that their brothers went through, it will still stay solely about power. But yes, there are some countries, Arab countries, that managed to do the shift. Therefore, I'm slightly optimistic. But again, I'm not a prophet. So I do hope the best for the future, Lebanon, Egypt, and Syria. Not extremely optimistic, but I do have a little hope for them.
Now, are you able to pinpoint how countries like Azerbaijan or the UAE made that transition? Was a very powerful leadership? Where did that come from that could be replicated elsewhere?
Um, First of all, the UAE came out with their millennial goals, and one of the millennial goals was the move towards a knowledge-based economy. Some states took that and formed plans in around 2010. It was after the economic crisis, so a lot of states understood that they have to shift their economy and do a lot of adjustments and changes so that the crisis won't occur again. Some of those plans were implemented in these Muslim states. Azerbaijan had plans like this. Morocco had plans like this. Saudi Arabia had, the UAE. They called Vision 2021, Vision 2030. Each country has a different name for it. And they started implementing it. Now, implementing a knowledge based economy is divided into a few parts. First, as I said before, infrastructure. You can't create a knowledge based economy without, let's say, laptops, computers, access to Wi Fi. You need that throughout the country. Second, education. You need your people. Differently than gas and oil that we just dig and sell, here you need the people's minds. So you need to start education already from lower ages to university. Then you need the government to invest in knowledge and also not to disturb it. Ease of doing business, attracting investors, allowing low taxes is something that encourages entrepreneurship. So all of this um, together with one of the most interesting parts. Think about a knowledge based economy. Think about high tech. The Israeli high tech doesn't occur within Israel, it occurs globally. Investments come in, corporations are from outside. So you can't have this economy only by yourself. You need other countries that are knowledge based economy. Therefore, they started approaching countries in the region and globally that can assist them in this goal of a knowledge based economy. The leaders understood that and slowly put aside their old alliances that were against Israel in order to profit from what Israel can actually give them. And Israel can give them knowledge and technology. And that knowledge and technology is Israel's gas. It's Israel's most valuable asset. And that is one of the reasons that, together with the pact against Iran, obviously, when we're speaking about dynamics of power, but that alongside with the fact that they need Israeli knowledge and technology in all spectrums, not only in defense, but also in agriculture and medtech and all the spectrum of and finance and also security, that pushed them together towards Israel, also Saudi Arabia behind the scenes, and also other countries before the Abraham Accord were cooperating in Israel in order to gain power, strength, sustainability, growth, and prosperity.
Now, we're sitting here in Israel talking about changing the Middle East and how these Arab countries could develop knowledge-based economies, do away with their terrorism, but at the same time, they are exporting extremism and terrorism to the West, to the US and other countries abroad in Europe. And I'm wondering if we could see a scenario where it's safer for Jews and Israelis to travel to the Middle East than Western countries, and like this grand reversal happens in the world. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is getting more and more dangerous for Jews in Europe and also in the US, and we see anti Semitism in a rise. We also see actually this anti Semitism also in China, which wasn't the case just 10, 15 years ago, which is extremely worrying. And this is due also to the alliance with the states that are anti Israel. I don't believe that all Muslim states will be safe for Jews. I do think that the UAE is quite safe. Think about the murder of the Chabad representative who I knew and sat in his house for Shabbat dinner. And he was an amazing man. He was murdered, and his murderers that were caught were sentenced to death. That's how serious the UAE is. The UAE also publicly don't condemn Israel most of the time, and a lot of the things that the UAE do that it does it's a bit problematic with the UAE because they aren't as close as it seems. They do distance themselves sometimes, especially since the war from Israel, but that was always the case with them. Israel was in contact with the UAE before the Abraham Accords, but then we had I think in 2004, the Mabkhouh, when we went into Dubai and killed Mabkhouh, they decided to disconnect us completely. For 2 years, they didn't answer the phone. After things calmed down, then they came back. So that's usually what happens with the UAE. They go back a bit until it becomes quiet again, and then they jump back in because their stability is the most important to them. And if they feel that the Arab world isn't quiet about it, they will take a step back, but they always will come in if it benefits them. So in countries like the UAE and Morocco, it would be quite safe because terrorism is something that they also suffered from and they are battling against. But states like Egypt or Jordan or absolutely Syria are states that I don't see how they'll be safe in the upcoming years. So, just have to continue playing it by ear.
Dr. Daniela Giulia Traub, thank you so much for joining me
Thank you.
today. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you to all of our viewers and all of our supporters for tuning in today. If you appreciate this content, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing on YouTube. We will be back with you next week, Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.